What's up, guys? I'm Cody Brockway, and you're back here for another episode of Brockway's Vinyl Bites. Woohoo! So today we're going to answer a question that has been asked of me before, and maybe someone has asked you, and it is kind of hard to describe and explain what this is because it's a very lengthy topic. I mean, you can answer in a short form, but it doesn't really do it justice. So if anyone is asking you in your life, what is prog? What is the meaning of progressive rock? What is it? What is it? What is progressive rock? Then this is the video to show them. So, to give you the best answer I can give you, let's start here. So, back in the 60s, you had, bands like the Beatles who were constantly changing and evolving and pushing the boundaries of what could fit in popular music at the time. You had albums like Revolver, Rubber Soul. Each one is a progression right up to the very end with Let It Be, and then the solo careers and all that such and such, right? But you get albums like Abbey Road, where all the songs are only, on side 2 anyway, the songs are about 2-3 minutes long, but they feed together as one track, making a lengthy piece. That side of that album, of course, all the other Beatles albums too, but thinking just in terms of length of pieces of music that flow together as one whole, that album is extremely important to the whole idea of progressive rock. Then, of course, as a left turn from that, for lack of a better term, you've got the whole psychedelic movement of the time, with bands like Strawberry Alarm Clock, Jefferson Airplane and stuff, all writing songs that were, still relatively, short songs. Like, they weren't long pieces typically. I mean, the Doors did some longer pieces, but a lot of their stuff is primarily more blues-based in a sense. But other bands of that time, like Strawberry Alarm Clock and such that I mentioned, were writing these songs with these really abstract key changes, time changes and such and things like that. And so that was, one of the eras where bands were starting to go, well, I can write things that are outside of the regular form. So, this is not a 4-chord song anymore. All of a sudden, this song has 7 chords and it's got 3 time changes in it. So the psychedelic movement didn't last very long. It lasts from about 65 to 68, and it dies off right around 68 to 69 for the most part. In the bands that survived that movement, who didn't, die themselves, moved into different areas. The Grateful Dead, in the 70s is a different band than they were in the 60s, right? Anyway, getting a little off topic there, but 1969 comes this explosion. Of course, we get the Abbey Road suite, which I already mentioned, but then we also get an album called In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson. Now, my good friend and Prog Rock comrade, my friend and brother in Prague, Scott Lade from the Prog Corner, has actually he said a couple of weeks ago on one of the Sunday Prog streams that we did, he said that In the Court of the Crimson King was the first deliberate prog rock album. Well, it is hard to argue that. He's absolutely correct. There's only a couple of tracks on that, and most of them are very long. The first track, you're blasted into 21st century schizoid man with this heavy, avant-garde, jazzy, metallic, sort of just sprawling, epic, chaotic, wonderful, beautiful piece that takes up about the first 7 minutes of the album. Then you get into a song like I Talk to the Wind, which is very beautiful, calm with flutes and such. And then you close that side of the album out with a track called Epitaph, which is about 8-9 minutes, another long, lengthy piece. And then, side 2, you get the whole Moonchild song, which is 12 minutes, and it closes out the album with the title track, of course, and that's 9.5 minutes. Goes through various movements and dynamics and pieces and so on and so forth. And so that kind of, that is a good starter point to what the progressive rock movement is. But to give it a better explanation, Progressive rock is a type of rock music with complicated musical technique and composition. That means that the tempos, the time signatures, and style can change many times even just in a single song. Most normal rock or pop songs follow a different form, typically, for the most part they do. But it could be said that most normal rock songs follow a very simple pattern in the way that they are, arranged and produced. Progressive rock basically took the norms and flipped them on his head. All of a sudden, with progressive rock, bands were going out and, they're giving you longer than the 3 or 4 minute songs you hear on the radios. You're hearing all of a sudden, a 20-minute song? Still, people to this day, prog has been around for 55 plus years now, people. And I'm still meeting people to this day, you show them a song and it's 20 minutes, they go, 20 minutes long, that's insane. Well, it's a different art form is what it is. It's a different approach. Prog rock has a very different approach to the messages that they're trying to convey. And with some of these approaches, some of these bands have chosen to let the songs grow in length and to go through different peaks and valleys and things, just like bands like Yes and Genesis and Emerson, Lake and Palmer have done. More on those bands in a bit. But not every band actually wrote 20-minute epics. There's some prog bands of that era from the 1970s that wrote songs that were typically between 3 to 7 minutes long. Like Gentle Giant, for example, I don't think they have a song that actually cracks the 10-minute mark. So that's just their approach. All these prog bands have different approaches in the way that they go about writing their songs and composing their pieces, but typically it is different than what you would hear from a more traditional based band. Another thing that I feel is very important to mention if you're going to talk about progressive rock or progressive metal is the idea of the concept album. Now, concept album is not exclusive only to this genre, but there's lots of great examples of it within this genre. There's lots of bands that do it. Of course, there's concept series of albums where each album is connected to one another, but basically what the idea of the concept album is an album of which all the songs, musically and or lyrically, flow together to paint a picture and to tell a story. Just to give a few examples of some great, amazing prog rock, prog metal concept albums. Pink Floyd have done a couple, but I'm going to mention The Wall. I'm going to mention Genesis, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, Jethro Tull, Thick as a Brick, and Dream Theater, Metropolis Part 2, Scenes from a Memory. Now, of course, there are many others across the board, but this is just a couple examples I felt like sharing with you today. Prog bands are notorious for not only blending musical styles of all kinds, but having virtuosic playing on all fronts. The genre is noted for intricate and incredible drumming, extraordinary keyboard wizardry, great bass playing and great guitar playing, as I've already alluded to, great singing, and it is also noted for wonderful and sometimes whimsical storytelling in the lyrics. Heavy use of the mellotron, and of course, the Moog synthesizer, which can be heard at the end of Emerson, Lake and Palmer's 1970 track Lucky Man, which is at the end of their self-titled debut record of the same year. Progressive rock has also influenced and dominated a lot of other different and some heavier styles of music as well, including jazz, metal, thrash metal, math rock, due to, of course, its heavy use of time signature changes and such, power metal, and many more. Prog rock really came to prominence in the 1970s, much due to bands, of course, like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, as I mentioned previously, Yes, Genesis, Jethro Tull, King Crimson, Queen, Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, Gentle Giant, and Rush, just to name a few. Of course, there is many more. All of these bands of the time, and many more, pushed the boundaries of the length that songs could be and where they could take each and every track. Peaks and valleys, my friend, peaks and valleys. They also pushed the lengths of how long albums could be as well. This era is the birth of the 20-minute song, of course, as we covered before. Something that would go away and come back in a big way much later on down the road, in the 90s and 2000s and stuff, when bands like Dream Theater and stuff were doing the side-long epics again. But we'll get to that in a little bit. Towards the end of the 70s, as fashion trends came and went, some bands imploded. Some bands had big member changes, but many remained in finding ways to stay afloat or maybe even get bigger in popularity as the decade would grow on into the 80s. A lot of these bands and musicians would go on to find ways to evolve and change their sounds to experiment with new technology and what was coming of the times. In the 80s, prog rock would face a big sonic change as some bands opted to experiment with new sounds such as 808s and Lindrums. Heavier, more dominant use of what is called the synth bass. Some bands would adapt to having shorter song lengths. Some bands would have less use of guitars in some cases. Heavier keyboard usage overall, and different directional approaches to the songwriting, as some of these bands, while keeping their prog rock credit, were actually scoring big hit songs during these times. But of course, also in the 1980s, you would see other bands, particularly in the metal scene, like, for example, Metallica, Megadeth, and Iron Maiden, just to name a few, which would borrow elements of prog rock, and those elements can be heard variously throughout all of these bands' careers, but highlighted in tracks like The Call of Cthulhu, Master of Puppets, Good Morning Black Friday, Five Magics, Hallowed Be Thy Name, and Rime of the Ancient Mariner, just to name a few. Of course, even beyond this, prog rock would sneak back into the stratosphere with a vengeance. That's right, heavy guitars, crazy time signatures and all. When in the late 80s and early 90s we saw a surgence of bands like Queensryche, Dream Theater, and King's X, just to name a few, who were coming onto the scene to mark a new era of prog rock that would now be appropriately referred to as progressive metal. These bands proved to be very influential to this period of music, as they would also bring back the idea of the concept album, which we talked about a little while ago. Continuing further into the 1990s and 2000s, prog rock and prog metal would continue to take on new leanings as it would go in different directions with bands like Spock's Beard, the Flower Kings, Porcupine Tree, Opeth, and Tool, just to name a few as examples, all putting new and different, heavier spins on the genre. In this era, we also see the return of the long epic tracks, the songs that range from 10 to 20 minutes, sometimes longer than that. We see a lot of that stuff return into the fold as well. Some examples of prog rock's longer epic tracks across the decades include, but are not limited to, Close to the Edge by Yes, Supper's Ready by Genesis, Echoes by Pink Floyd, 2112 by Rush, All of the Above by Transatlantic, and Octavarium by Dream Theater, just to name you a mere few. Of course, there are many, many more across this entire genre, across the last 40, 50 years of music. Bands are still doing this, and there's more epic tracks even by these bands I've just mentioned to you. A glimpse at a few classic prog rock and prog metal albums throughout the years include, but are also not limited to, Close to the Edge by Yes, Thick as a Brick by Jethro Tull, Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd, which is the highest selling prog rock album of all time, Selling England by the Pound by Genesis, The Power and the Glory by Gentle Giant, Voyage of the Acolyte by Steve Hackett, UK by UK, Moving Pictures by Rush, Script for a Jester's Tear by Marillion, Images and Words by Dream Theater. Now we're going to talk about more modern day releases, basically the 2000s up until now. Of course, we've got Octavarium by Dream Theater, Dead Wing by Porcupine Tree, Blackwater Park by Opeth, Lateralis by Tool, Wolf Light by Steve Hackett, Noise Floor by Spock's Beard, The Absolute Universe by Transatlantic, Fauna by Haken, War of Being by Tesseract, I.O. by Peter Gabriel, and Himmelbecken Volume 2 by Moon Safari, just to name you a few from the modern day period, 2000s and up, era of prog rock, prog metal as well. Of course, there are countless other albums and songs that are also worthy of a mention here that I didn't get to name today, but I've done my best to leave a few great examples for those who may be new to the genre or are curious about it. If you are dipping your feet into the world of prog, you've definitely made a great choice. Don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise. You've made an awesome choice, and I'm happy to have you here. It's good for you to know that even in the current decade, prog is alive and well. We are getting albums from more modern progressive metal acts I've mentioned, like Haken, Tesseract, Carnival, and Moon Safari, to new albums and tours from musicians and bands who've been around for a bit longer, some of which I've also already mentioned, such as Dream Theater, Peter Gabriel, The Flower Kings, the Neil Morris Band, Steve Hackett, Spock's Beard, Porcupine Tree, Opeth, and many, 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 many more. So to answer the question, what is prog? Well, prog and metal music have a lot in common, as I've documented here. Like metal, prog rock is music that evolves beyond all expectations, limitations, and any form of artistic musical boundaries. That's right. You heard it right here on Brockway's Vinyl Bites, folks. We've found the answer to what is prog. How can I explain prog to people? Well, I think you've found some good examples, and I think you've found a pretty good answer here. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you know someone who's asking what prog is, link them to this, and hopefully this will help them out and get them a deeper understanding of what the genre is as a whole. Well, awesome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time right here on Brockway's Vinyl Bites, baby. Woo! Rock on!